Well, welcome to the Goat Shed. We're about to do part 2 of the drop target reassembly on fast draw. We've cleaned and polished all the parts, as you can see, they're nice and shiny. We have the coil cases have all come up nicely. So the top and the bottom have come up nice. We've received the new drop targets just over here from the USA. That's what held us up. We had to wait for those drop targets to come in. There's Spanky overseeing a bit of this work. So first job we've got to do is put the plates back together. So we've now got the I'll call it the base plate or the top plate. They're very, very similar, and we've screwed those switches back down. We've just got a block of wood under there to make it a little bit easier to things to sit up. So they're going in. Now we have the triggers here. We've cleaned those all up. This one of the triggers, they're a little bit worn, but they're not too bad, so probably get away with that okay. So the screwing of that frame's going back on now. And one thing we want to show you, those frames have got a little notch in them. When you put them back together, the top and the bottom frame, see that notch there? Right there. You've got to have them matched up. Don't have them disoriented from top to bottom. Otherwise things can go a little wishy-washy. So this is a good example of what to do with this target assembly, because this is the one that has that feature on it which allows the two outside drop targets to go down and the top and the middle one to stay in place, and this is achieved by those wire forms there. Notice there's not one in the middle, so when that coil is actuated, goes through here in the plunger, that pushes forward and drops the targets down. So that's quite a clever little feature. So what we're up to now is putting that plate back on. I mean, it's not rocket science, you've just got to know how to pull it apart. I mean, and the good thing is, of course, we have the other target bank here to check if we make a mistake. So that's always very helpful when you've got a second one, but you soon figure out if you've done something wrong. Now you can see on this target bank here we're missing a couple of rubber grommets. We've got those in stock, we'll put those on. I mentioned earlier we've got those on there now. Yep. So let's just keep carrying on and show you what we're doing as we go. Right, next up we put the new targets, drop targets, in their correct position in the frame, and we refit the spring on the drop target. Now this is important. There are two types of springs that go in these drop targets. One goes on the target themselves and one goes on the trigger. That's the trigger. Now the lighter spring go on the targets and the heavier spring goes on the triggers. This is critically important to the proper operation of the drop target mechanism. When you do have the springs or you get them mixed up, you can tell the difference by feeling the tension, but we try and keep them separate. Now the other thing that we're doing, and we really aren't showing you there I guess, is that we're making sure that the eye on the end of the spring is good where we're onto the target. We don't want them falling off. So now he's just going to position this so he can just pop it in. Like everything, it's a little bit fiddly, and then he can put the screws in the frame. So far so good. The system's all going back together as expected. There we are. Just line the holes up and we're good to go. Now we use one of these, a spring screwdriver. So Graham's just fitting that in now. He's going to hold that over here and show you what it does. Pretty much that's a hacksaw blade brazed or soldered, try and get a bit of focus, just into a rod. They hold the screw on and you get to start the screw. You only start the screw, you don't try and use this as a screwdriver because you could break the blade. So he'll put that back. Now it's starting to look like a drop target bank again. Hold it up, there we go. Right. Looking good, isn't it, Spanky? Right, next up is to put the legs back on. So there's 4 of those. So, as you can see, this doesn't take a long time to do, but it can just be a little bit fiddly if you're not certain on what to do. So you just take your time, make sure you took some photos, and away you'll go. So it's been flipped over and we're doing the leg on the other side. Once again, everything straightforward up till now. Now, to make things a little bit easier to put the triggers in, we decided we'll probably lift those switches back off to give us a bit more room to move and see exactly what we're doing. So that's what we're just doing now. It's not hard, we just got to undo all those screws. There you go, they're off now. Okay, now next job before you actually put the triggers in is to reinsert the reset bar and just let it float in there. So that reset bar is just going to go in, it's just going to sit there, because if you don't put that in now, you'll have some difficulty, or you really won't get it in all that easy. Now there also is a bearing. We just hold that bearing up so we can show the viewers. Here it is. That bearing goes in the end. Now it goes in here. There's one going in this end and one going in the other end. So that's just getting fitted. Right, the bearing's gone back in both ends. Once again, there's the bearing there, one in the other end. Now we can operate that. It all works. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put a trigger back in. Now see that shaft? Now that's the shaft that goes through all the triggers and comes out the other end of the bearing. There it goes in there. Now you watch what happens now. We put that, we're just going to show you how that goes in. We're just going to turn that round so you can see. Just pull that out again, Graham, so the viewers can see which way it goes. It's going to go in this way.
We'll just double check, always double check. Yep. Perfect.
Just turn it around, Graham, the viewers can't see. Yeah, that's right, yeah. It's going to go in that way, like that. That goes in. You lift the reset bar out of the road,
into the groove,
drop that in and push the rod through. Righto, so we've got one in. Now, when we did our first video of removing this, we mentioned about that rod. If you have another rod, and if you had, say, the black target was broken, with that follow-through method, you can just put the 2 rods in, push one rod through, and where they join, you could just pull the rods apart so that, just say, the black one would come out. Imagine that on a 10-bang target if you had one of the middle ones. That's the trick, but you have to have one of those rods. Now we're fortunate we do have one because we've got a few drop target banks spare. Now you can just see what Graham's doing there. He's just putting the triggers in and he's pushing the rod through. So obviously if you had a rod coming out the left-hand end, that's how you do that little trick we just mentioned. Now the next job is to be putting the springs on. That's a little bit fiddly, but you'll get them on. And this is where we use a spring hook. Okay, so we've got one more on the end to do, and he's almost finished. Right, you can visually see now all the triggers all lined up in the machine, the shaft through. Now there's Still some clips to go on that shaft and a hair spring, but there you go. It all operates up and down. Now, like we said a moment ago, we're now going to go and put the springs on, and
which we'll do with the spring hook.
Which we'll use a spring hook. Now, first up, we're just hooking the springs onto the target springs on, and I'll show you that at the other end in a moment when we turn that over. Notice how he's got the spring hook down there, fishing for the spring. Once he gets it, he can simply hook it on. Now, you can see originally we hooked the spring on to the anchor on the drop target itself, and now we've hooked it onto the hook on the trigger. So we've got 5 of those to do. We'll complete that in a minute, and then the next job to do is put the spring from the trigger to the frame, and they're a little bit trickier. Now, this is a little hard to illustrate, but the next job we've got to do is hook the trigger springs on. Now, remember we mentioned earlier about the slightly heavier duty spring. Once again, you can buy these new. In this case, we do have them in stock, but they weren't too bad before we started. So what we're going to do, we're just going to cut 1 loop off the end of each. Then we're going to get the spring, we're going to hook it onto there, that anchor, and then we're going to pull it up and hook it on and put it in that hole. So let's go ahead and see if we can do that. I'm not sure if we can be able to see that as we go. Let's try. Okay, so lifting the target up, getting the spring on a pair of pliers, dropping it down there like that, and hooking it on, lifting it up, and popping it in,
And that's it.
and that's it. That was pretty good first go. Sometimes it takes a couple of goes. Okay, nice and snappy return.
So, do the other
So
thing.
now we've just got to do the others. Happy days. Now, here are the 2 springs in the parts manual. Now, this is out of the Gottlieb 1978 parts manual. These are available to order from PBR. And if you're serious about your pinball machines, I suggest you get one of these manuals. They're not all that expensive. I don't remember how. You'd have to check with Steve Young. But the target spring is this one here that they're indicating. Right there. And the trigger spring is this one here. Now, the part numbers for those I've written down here for you. There they are, the target spring A12178 and the trigger spring A517. Now, if you need new triggers, they're part number A12181. So there it is again, the trigger A12181, and those rubber grommets that go on the back plates are part number #986. So make a note of those. If you have to order any parts from PBR or wherever you buy your parts, we recommend PBR. After all, they are the holder of the Gottlieb license for parts. So we've just about completed the spring fitting now. Let's just have a look. Okay, so just setting this up in a block of wood, we'll just knock those targets down manually. Down they go, and up they come.
Something's adjusting.
Well, there's one. We just need to have a look at that, why that's not doing that. Let's find out why that's not happening. All that really was is that we've got it on an angle, we haven't got the coil in, and it just wasn't getting enough stroke, so there's nothing wrong with that. So we'll just carry on putting this back together. We're almost ready to put it back in the machine. As a matter of fact, we've just got to fit the hairspring on the end. We'll show you that and put a couple of clips on. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, we've got to put the series bar in. Now the series bar is the bar that actuates the switches on the back for like a sequence completed. Now this particular series bar someone's actually repaired before. So we've straightened it out, we just slide it in there. Now all you do, we just pull the rod through a bit, hook it on one end,
Look through, put it back.
Poke it through. That little bearing fell out because there's a clip meant to be on there.
And then you do the same to the other side.
Yep, and then they're exactly the same on the other side. So don't forget the series bar, very important.
It's easy to do the drop targets down.
Now they do break, and as you might have heard Graham say in the background, you're best to do that with the drop targets down. Just reiterating on they break, as I mentioned, that one had been sort of tack welded. We actually had one broken right off in a Gottlieb big shot not long ago, and that's a 7 target bank. Oh gee, we had trouble finding one. We couldn't, so we had to make one out of a 10 target bank, and it was a bit fiddly. Now this part here is unique to only a few different types of machines. So this is fast draw.
Well, as far as we know that.
And the other machine we can think of that it goes in is jacks open. Now it's called a trim arm, which is an interesting name for it, but that's what it is. And these wire forms, as I mentioned earlier, are the things that push the targets in, but there's not one in the middle, so the black one won't, it'll stay up. And they're actually adjustable. You just loosen that screw and you can just pull that forward. They're just held down by, that's literally a locking plate. So undo the screw, just move it forward, but you would rarely have to adjust those, I wouldn't imagine. So yeah, a trim arm, if you didn't know that. Matter of fact, I didn't till I looked up the parts catalogue. So that's that spring there, the A13455. I call them a hairspring. Gottlieb in the manual just describe it as a spring. So we're going to fit that back onto the machine now. So that spring actually just fits on to the shaft, the trigger shaft. He's pulled that back out, he's putting it in, and it hooks under the frame. We'll show you in a minute when we get it in.
Another fiddly job.
Yep, another fiddly job. Okay, so you can see it just hooks around where the screw is there, and then on the top of the reset bar. Now I think I said series bar before, which the series bar's down here, that's it there. The series bar, it's not the series bar, it's the reset bar. That's my fault, sorry about that, viewers. So now we're just got to put this trim bar on. Now the trim bar is going to fit on the trigger shaft, and with the bearings on this, what happens is they stick out, so they go in from the inside. Just move that round, Graham, so people can see that. I wasn't sure if they saw that. Can everyone see that? They stick out. Okay, now it's just a matter of fitting it onto the unit. Not really rocket science. Same on the other end with the bearing. Just popping it down.
Push it through. Same on the other side.
So you can see there it is there. That's the end of the bearing. That's just something you've got to watch out for. The bearing on the other side, that bit went to the inside. Remember, this trim bar isn't on every drop target, as we just said, so this is just a little extra that you've got to do.
Right.
There it is, it's in. So now it's just a matter of putting the coil cases back together, and these 9/64 Allen key is needed for that, and then we can assemble everything back up. Right, we're just screwing the coil casing back on to the side. Now there's no adjustment on that side. You can't adjust the stroke, it's fixed. Remember, we said any adjustment that you need to do to that, as far as kicking the target down, is done by loosening that screw there and moving that wire form. Like I said earlier, it's quite a good design. We've also still got to put a circlip on there, so
yeah, both ends.
don't forget to do that, or your shaft will end up falling out. Now once you've put that other coil in, this coil here can be adjusted up and down. But before we show you how to do that adjustment, we were looking off camera again at that drop target that wasn't resetting correctly. Now what we discovered is the trigger is actually badly worn. Now we've sort of screwed up there. We'll just drop it down a bit so we can show you. And let's see, there it is there. I'm going to bring this in as close as I can get it, and you can see it's actually cut away in there. How we missed that I don't know, but we did. Needless to say, we're going to change that. Now we thought we had some new triggers, but we haven't, so we've kept second-hand ones here over the years when we've changed them, and we are going to do another order soon, so we'll get some new triggers. But here's a second-hand one that I've just prepared. Now you can see that I've ground the sides of it here, and it was a little bit dinted in at the top. There's still a slight indentation, but that's not going to worry us. That's going to be fine. So we're going to replace that. As I say, I'm really not sure how we missed that, but we did. So let's replace it, then we'll go in to show you how to do the adjustment on the upstroke of the coil stop and bracket. Right, so now we've replaced that trigger, which was giving us a bit of grief. We've adjusted the coil stroke by loosening those 4 screws. And now we'll do a reset for you and show you how it works. There you go, it's all good. And of course that middle one gets pushed down, well, it doesn't get pushed down when the other bit's operated. So just resetting those for you again, everything will reset. There you go, and if we push the other coil, that one there, all works. So what we've got to do now, we've got to just finish doing the other bank, and then we'll put a bank back in the machine, and we'll show you how we do that. Right, now we've got the Playfield in the cradle, and we'll commence to reassemble the whole unit. Now we call this like a butterfly assembly. That's the bit that pushes the switches out for the sequence completed. We've just screwed that in place. Now we'll go and fit the drop target unit into the slot where it belongs. So we've got that in place. And we'll screw the legs down. The other side first. Now it's interesting to note the holes where these screws go in have been damaged because we've seen that these drop targets have been out before, because both sides the reset bar had been welded and one side the series bar had been welded. So this machine's been well played over a period of time. Next job we'll do is we'll put the switch stack back in. Rightio, we've got this switch stack back on now. Now this is the stack that tells that all the targets are down. So all the targets are currently down. Now you watch this stack here just carefully. Now notice it's opened up, both switches are open, now they're closed when we drop it again. So obviously we've cleaned those switches and you're just checking that that's all good. And it is. Now the only job we've got that remains to be done now is to solder these wires on each end. There's one wire here and one wire here and the coil wires. And the job's all done. So we'll just do that off camera. Well, we're not quite finished. We've just realised that we've put this coil with the lugs facing the wrong way the lugs have got to face this way, so we're just taking that out now and fixing that up. And of course we have to put the switches on the back plate as well. They're the scoring switches on the back plate, so they've got to go on as well. So we'll just carry on with that. Now, just to show you a couple of additional things, we always like to check the continuity of the wires going across those switches, because it's quite easy to get a break. So we've clipped a lead onto one end, we'll put it onto the other, and hopefully, there you go, it's all good. Now we'll just change that over. Okay, other side of the switches, there you go, all good. Now just one other thing while we're doing that, when we screw these switch stacks back on, all the screws fall out. There's two slightly longer screws, pretty common sense, but those slightly longer screws go in the stack because it's got extra stacks on it. So just be aware of that. We'll just do the other side now. Righto, let's do that. Let me just put that back on there. You want to pop the drop targets, reset them, Graham? Good. Righty, yeah. Oh, what did you do with the, hang on, that's in the road. What did you do with the two Allen keys? Right, that's okay. Alright, let's turn it over. Get those switches. Oh, wait, what the hell are they? There. Scoring switches there. Worry about that. How are we going to reset that with a reset coil with it? Beautiful.
Pretty good. Want the goat?
Yep, get the goat, put him on top of the... No, he's out of focus. He's... Yeah, I'll just put it down to 1 again.